When we think of British actors, we picture enduring careers spanning decades, theatrical excellence, and performances that transcend generations. But not every story follows that script. Some of Britain's most promising talents reached dizzying heights of fame only to disappear from the spotlight in ways that shocked the industry. These weren't simply actors who chose quieter lives or gracefully retired. These were careers that imploded, lives that spiraled, and talents that the world lost far too soon. From Oscar-nominated child stars consumed by addiction to leading men whose demons destroyed everything they built, these stories reveal the brutal price of fame when things go catastrophically wrong. Here are 12 shocking stories about British actors who completely vanished from fame. Oliver Reed, Britain's thirstiest thespian. Oliver Reed didn't just drink heavily. According to multiple sources, his alcohol consumption reached legendary proportions that would kill most people. At the peak of his career in the 1960s and early 1970s, Reed was one of Britain's highest-paid actors, commanding major roles in films like Oliver, Women in Love, and The Devils. His performances brought raw, masculine intensity to the screen that made him unforgettable. Behind the scenes, however, Reed cultivated a reputation as perhaps the most notorious hellraiser in British cinema history, regularly appearing on talk shows, visibly intoxicated, and making headlines for bar fights and outrageous behavior. By the mid-1970s, Reed's alcoholism wasn't just affecting his reputation, it was destroying his body. Multiple biographers reported that he drank staggering amounts daily, and his behavior on set became increasingly unpredictable. Major Hollywood studios began declining to work with him. One executive was quoted saying they turned Reed down because he showed no respect for anyone, and Hollywood wanted stars who understood professional boundaries. The British Film Institute later noted that from the mid-70s onward, his alcoholism severely damaged his career, essentially making him Britain's answer to the notoriously heavy-drinking actor Robert Newton. Reed's film roles diminished to low-budget European productions that barely registered with audiences. On May 2, 1999, while filming Gladiator in Malta, the 61-year-old Reed entered a pub filled with British sailors on shore leave. They challenged him to a drinking contest. What followed was Reed's final performance. Sources indicate he consumed 8 pints of German lager, a dozen shots of rum, half a bottle of whiskey, and several shots of cognac while arm wrestling 5 sailors. His bar tab reportedly reached $435. After this marathon drinking session, Reed collapsed from a heart attack and died en route to the hospital. Director Ridley Scott had to use computer-generated imagery to complete Reed's remaining scenes, digitally placing his face onto a body double. That Maltese pub was later renamed Ollie's Last Pub in his memory. Jack Wilde. From Oscar nominee to voiceless tragedy. At 16 years old, Jack Wilde received an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor for his charming performance as the Artful Dodger in the 1968 film Oliver. He instantly became a global sensation, receiving roughly 2,000 fan letters weekly and landing a reported $1 million contract to star in the children's television series H.R. Pufnstuf. Wilde was positioned to become one of Britain's greatest actors, with a recording contract and international fame most performers only dream of achieving. Teen magazines called him a heartthrob alongside David Cassidy, and his future seemed limitless. The reality was far darker. Wilde had started smoking at age 12, and by 17 was drinking heavily. At 21, he was diagnosed as an alcoholic and developed diabetes. The transition from child star to adult actor proved impossible as his drinking spiraled completely out of control. His film career stalled by 1976, and the roles stopped coming entirely. By the early 1980s, according to his later accounts, Wilde's typical daily consumption reportedly included beginning midday with large bottles of white wine, followed by beer and spirits in the evening. He believed wine couldn't be detected on his breath, so he'd drink it before driving. His first marriage collapsed in 1985 when his wife left him because of his chronic alcoholism. The 1980s became what Wilde himself called his drinking career. Sources close to him indicated he would drink, vomit, fall unconscious, wake up, and repeat the cycle endlessly. Day and night lost all meaning. He suffered 3 cardiac arrests, spent time in numerous hospitals, and exhausted his entire fortune. He moved in with his retired father, completely broke and unable to work. Wilde attempted multiple rehabilitation programs, including one funded by Pete Townshend of The Who, but within hours of completing one treatment, he bought champagne to celebrate sobriety, then relapsed within a month. He finally achieved sobriety in March 1989 through a faith-based group called Alcoholics Victorious, remaining sober for the final 16 years of his life. In 2001, Wilde was diagnosed with oral cancer, which he attributed directly to decades of heavy drinking and smoking. After undergoing chemotherapy, he had his tongue and vocal cords surgically removed in July 2004, rendering him completely unable to speak. For his final 2 years, his wife Claire had to communicate for him. Wilde died March 1, 2006, at age 53. His autobiography, completed by his widow and published in 2016, revealed a man who'd been given everything fame could offer and lost it all to addiction before even reaching his prime. Peter O'Toole. 8 nominations, no wins, and a destroyed body. Peter O'Toole achieved instant superstardom at age 30 when he starred as T.E. Lawrence in David Lean's epic masterpiece, Lawrence of Arabia, in 1962. His piercing blue eyes and commanding presence made him an international sensation overnight, and his performance earned him the first of an unprecedented 8 Academy Award nominations for Best Actor. More nominations without a win than any actor in history. Throughout the 1960s, O'Toole delivered masterful performances in Beckett, The Lion in Winter, and Goodbye, Mr. Chips, establishing himself as one of cinema's greatest leading men. He was grouped among British actors known as Hellraisers alongside Richard Burton, Richard Harris, and Oliver Reed, all famous for their extraordinary drinking. O'Toole's alcohol consumption was reportedly staggering. Multiple sources claimed he drank 2 to 3 bottles of vodka daily during his heaviest periods. On film sets, he often appeared intoxicated, causing production delays and conflicts with colleagues. His drinking partner, Keith Moon of The Who, matched his legendary consumption, and the two created chaos wherever they went. By the mid-1970s, O'Toole's body was failing catastrophically. He began hemorrhaging internally, requiring emergency life-saving surgery. Doctors removed large portions of his stomach, pancreas, and intestines, leaving him insulin-dependent for life. What they initially attributed to alcoholism turned out to be stomach cancer, though the drinking had certainly contributed to his physical deterioration. The surgery and its aftermath marked a turning point. O'Toole gave up alcohol, but the damage to his appearance was severe. Once strikingly handsome, he became gaunt and prematurely aged, looking decades older than his actual years. His career struggled through the late 70s as good roles became scarce, partially due to his wrecked appearance and partially due to his reputation for being difficult to work with. His 20-year marriage to actress Sian Phillips ended in divorce in 1979. Many believed his career was finished. However, O'Toole mounted an extraordinary comeback in 1980 with The Stuntman, earning his 6th Oscar nomination, followed by another for My Favorite Year in 1982. Though he never won the competitive Oscar, he continued working into his 70s, earning his 8th and final nomination for Venus in 2006. When the Academy offered him an honorary award in 2002, he initially refused, insisting he was still in the game and wanted to win outright. He died December 14, 2013, at age 81 from complications of a long illness. Despite his comeback, Those who knew him agreed that had he not fallen so spectacularly into alcoholism, his career would have been even more extraordinary, and his final decades wouldn't have been spent as a physical shell of his former self. Matthew Garber, Disney's lost star. Most people remember Mary Poppins as a magical, heartwarming Disney classic, but few know the tragic story of Matthew Garber, the young British actor who played Michael Banks. Garber was discovered by actor Roy Dotrice in 1963, while Dotrice was searching for child actors for Disney productions. Young Garber's natural mannerisms, squinting, scrunching his nose, brushing back his hair, made him stand out to Disney's casting department. He landed his first role in The 3 Lives of Thomasina before securing the part that would define his brief career. Michael Banks, opposite Karen Dotrice's Jane, in the 1964 film Mary Poppins. Mary Poppins became one of the biggest hits in Disney history and remains beloved generations later. Garber's performance was charming and authentic, capturing the wonder of childhood perfectly. The film's success should have launched a long, prosperous career in Hollywood. Instead, something went terribly wrong. After completing work on the 1967 film The No Mobile, also with Karen Dotrice, Garber essentially vanished from the entertainment industry. He was only 15 years old. The circumstances surrounding what happened next remained somewhat unclear, but the outcome was devastating. In 1977, just 10 years after his last film, Matthew Garber died at only 21 years old. According to available records, he contracted hepatitis while traveling in India, which led to hemorrhagic necrotizing pancreatitis, a brutal condition where the pancreas essentially destroys itself. He died in London on June 13, 1977. Disney had lost one of its young stars to a terrible illness, and the world lost a talented actor who never got the chance to grow into adult roles. Unlike many child stars whose careers simply faded, Garber's story ended in genuine tragedy before he could even attempt to continue acting. His co-star Karen Dotrice later spoke about the loss, remembering him fondly as a talented young performer whose potential was never realized. Julian Sands, From Room with a View to Vanishing Forever. Julian Sands seemed destined for Hollywood greatness after his breakout role as George Emerson in the critically acclaimed 1985 British romance A Room with a View. The film, directed by James Ivory, won the BAFTA for Best Film and received 8 Oscar nominations, winning 3. Sands's performance as the passionate young man who falls in love with Helena Bonham Carter's character during a holiday in Tuscany showcased his classical good looks and sensitive acting style. Following this success, Sands moved to Hollywood to pursue an American film career, appearing in the horror film Warlock, the thriller Arachnophobia with Jeff Daniels and John Goodman, and Nicolas Cage's Leaving Las Vegas. After Leaving Las Vegas in 1995, however, multiple sources noted that the quality of Sands's film roles and the size of his parts began declining noticeably. He worked steadily, appearing in more than 150 films and television shows over a 40-year career, but never recaptured the acclaim of his early work. His roles became increasingly smaller, and he transitioned primarily to television guest appearances on series like 24, Dexter, Smallville, and Gotham. The leading man status he'd achieved with A Room with a View gradually faded as he became a character actor, taking whatever work came his way. By the 2000s and 2010s, most audiences had forgotten the promising young star who once seemed poised for A-list stardom. On January 13, 2023, Sands went hiking alone on Mount San Antonio in the San Gabriel Mountains northeast of Los Angeles. He was an experienced mountaineer who loved hiking and had survived an avalanche in the Andes in the early 1990s that killed 3 others in his party. That evening, when he failed to return, he was reported missing. Severe winter storms hampered the initial search efforts. For 5 months, search teams conducted 8 official missions involving more than 500 volunteer search hours, scouring remote and dangerous terrain. On June 24th, hikers discovered human remains in the area where Sands had disappeared. They were positively identified as Sands on June 27th. He was 65 years old. The official cause of death was listed as undetermined due to the condition of the body. Julian Sands didn't just vanish from fame, he literally vanished from the earth, his final moments a mystery on a mountain he'd chosen to climb alone. Andrew Lincoln, walking away from the walking dead. Andrew Lincoln became a household name worldwide as Rick Grimes, the heroic sheriff and reluctant leader in AMC's massively successful series, The Walking Dead. For nearly a decade, from 2010 to 2018, Lincoln's face was instantly recognizable to millions of fans as he anchored one of television's most watched shows. His American accent was so convincing that many viewers were shocked to discover he was actually British. Lincoln had steady work in British television before The Walking Dead, but nothing approaching this level of international fame. He was at the absolute peak of his career, earning substantial money and global recognition. Then, seemingly at the height of his success, Lincoln made a decision that stunned fans and the industry alike. He walked away. In 2018, during the show's 9th season, while it still commanded massive viewership, Lincoln announced he was leaving the series. His reason was simple but profound. He wanted to return home to Britain to spend time with his family. His children were growing up across the Atlantic while he filmed in Georgia for 10 months each year, and he'd missed too much of their lives. Unlike actors who leave hit shows due to contract disputes or creative differences, Lincoln's departure was purely about prioritizing family over fame. Since leaving The Walking Dead, Lincoln has indeed returned to Britain and taken on only limited projects, primarily smaller British productions that allow him to remain close to home. He hasn't pursued the Hollywood film career that his level of fame could have easily secured. Instead, he's largely vanished from the international spotlight that once made him one of the most recognizable actors on television. Fans still hope for his return in occasional Walking Dead projects, and he has appeared in some specials, but the days of Andrew Lincoln as a major television star are deliberately behind him. He represents a rare case of an actor who chose to vanish from fame not because of scandal, addiction, or career failure, but because he genuinely valued his private life more than continuing to be a global star. For Lincoln, the choice to disappear wasn't tragic. It was intentional, and by all accounts, he has no regrets about walking away from one of television's biggest roles. Rupert Grint, lost in Harry Potter's shadow. For 10 years, from 2001 to 2011, Rupert Grint's face was recognized by hundreds of millions of people worldwide as Ron Weasley, the loyal best friend in the Harry Potter franchise. He grew up on camera alongside Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson, and the 3 young British actors became synonymous with their characters. When the series concluded, many wondered whether Grint could successfully transition to adult roles the way his co-stars attempted to do. The answer, it seems, was no, but not because he failed to try. Instead, Grint essentially chose to step back from the Hollywood machine that had dominated his childhood and teenage years. After Harry Potter ended, Grint initially appeared in smaller British films and stage productions, seemingly taking a deliberate step away from Hollywood's intense spotlight. Unlike Radcliffe, who aggressively pursued diverse and challenging roles to escape the Harry Potter shadow, or Watson, who became both a fashion icon and activist while maintaining her acting career, Grint largely retreated from public view. He did some independent films and British television work, but nothing that captured significant attention or demonstrated he could carry projects outside the Harry Potter universe. The roles were small, the productions modest, and the public response minimal. For years, Grint seemed to have almost completely vanished from the industry that made him famous. He wasn't making headlines, wasn't pursuing blockbusters, and wasn't even particularly active on social media compared to his former co-stars. Some wondered if he'd simply given up on acting, unable to find his footing in a post-Potter world. In reality, Grint was focusing on his personal life and choosing projects that interested him rather than chasing fame. He became a father, bought property, and invested in business ventures, including his own ice cream van, a quirky personal dream that had nothing to do with Hollywood glamour. In recent years, Grint has re-emerged somewhat with roles in series like Servant for Apple TV+, showing he hasn't completely abandoned acting. But he'll never recapture the cultural phenomenon status he had as Ron Weasley. Unlike his former co-stars who remained visible and relevant in entertainment and culture, Grint largely vanished into comfortable obscurity, seemingly content to let his childhood fame remain just that, a memory of something he did when he was young. Jack Gleason, King Joffrey, killed his career on purpose. Jack Gleason created one of television's most hated villains as the sadistic, cruel King Joffrey Baratheon in HBO's cultural phenomenon, Game of Thrones. His performance was so convincingly despicable that it sparked a peculiar phenomenon. While the character was universally reviled, critics heaped praise on Gleason's exceptional acting abilities. The young Irish actor raised in Britain had made King Joffrey unforgettable through his sneering delivery, entitled tantrums, and shocking cruelty. Some actors dream their entire careers of creating a character audiences respond to so viscerally. Gleason accomplished it before his mid-20s. Despite his rising star status and the doors that Game of Thrones could have opened, Gleason shocked fans and industry insiders alike when he announced his retirement from acting after his character's death in 2014. He was just 22 years old, at an age when most actors are desperately trying to break into the industry. Gleason stated honestly that he had lost his enjoyment of the craft, that the intensity of fame, the scrutiny, and the weird experience of being recognized everywhere for playing a character everyone hated had sapped his love of performance. He wanted a normal life, wanted to attend university, and wanted to pursue other interests outside the Hollywood spotlight. For years after Game of Thrones, Gleason truly did vanish from professional acting. He co-founded Collapsing Horse Theatre Company in Dublin and performed in small theatrical productions, but nothing approaching the scale of his previous fame. He pursued academic interests and lived quietly, exactly as he'd said he wanted to do. His retirement wasn't driven by scandal, addiction, or failure like so many other actors on this list. It was a thoughtful, deliberate choice by someone who realized early that fame and fortune weren't worth sacrificing his mental health and happiness. In 2020, Gleason surprised fans by announcing a low-key return to acting, taking on small roles that interested him without the massive pressure of a show like Game of Thrones. He remains largely removed from Hollywood, working on his own terms in independent projects. Gleason represents a rare example of an actor who vanished from fame because he genuinely wanted to, not because circumstances forced him away. He walked away from potential stardom because he was self-aware enough to know it wasn't making him happy. A level of wisdom many actors never achieve. Edward Furlong, from Terminator to terminated career, Edward Furlong shot to international fame at just 13 years old as John Connor in James Cameron's blockbuster Terminator 2: Judgment Day in 1991. His performance opposite Arnold Schwarzenegger was magnetic, capturing the vulnerability and toughness of a kid thrust into saving humanity's future. The film was one of the biggest hits of the decade, and Furlong instantly became one of Hollywood's most promising young actors. He followed up with roles in American History X, Pet Sematary 2, and other films that suggested a long, successful career ahead. Teen magazines featured him regularly, and casting directors saw him as the next big thing. Then everything fell apart with stunning speed. Furlong's promising career derailed due to serious substance abuse issues and legal troubles that began while he was still a teenager. Multiple sources documented his struggles with drugs and alcohol, which led to increasingly erratic behavior and made him difficult to work with. By the early 2000s, his once bright star had significantly dimmed as he faced multiple arrests for domestic violence, drug possession, and driving under the influence charges. The roles dried up, not because Furlong lacked talent, but because his personal life had become such a liability that studios refused to insure him or trust him to show up and perform professionally. The 2000s and 2010s saw Furlong bouncing between low-budget films, reality television appearances addressing his addiction, and continued legal problems. His physical appearance changed dramatically due to the effects of substance abuse, and the fresh-faced teen who'd captured audiences in Terminator 2 became almost unrecognizable. Multiple comeback attempts failed as he relapsed repeatedly. In interviews when he was sober, Furlong expressed regret about how his life had gone and acknowledged that he'd squandered incredible opportunities. Now, in his mid-40s, Furlong occasionally appears at fan conventions where nostalgic Terminator fans pay to meet him. He's expressed hope about rebuilding his career and has managed some small roles, but he remains largely removed from mainstream Hollywood. Unlike other actors who gradually faded from fame, Furlong's career essentially imploded within a decade of his breakthrough, destroyed by demons he battled throughout his adult life. His story is particularly tragic because the talent that made him special at 13 never got the chance to mature and develop as it should have. He didn't vanish from fame gracefully. He crashed and burned spectacularly, serving as a cautionary tale about child stardom and the devastating effects of addiction. Sean Pertwee. Typecast into obscurity. Sean Pertwee was born into acting royalty. His father, John Pertwee, famously played the Third Doctor in Doctor Who, and his grandfather and uncle were celebrated screenwriters and playwrights. After training at Bristol Old Vic Theatre School, Sean embarked on a promising career that seemed destined for major stardom. He worked with prestigious directors in films like Event Horizon, Equilibrium, alongside Christian Bale, and Neil Marshall's Dog Soldiers. In 1997, Pertwee even co-founded Natural Nylon, a production company with friends Ewan McGregor, Jude Law, Sadie Frost, and Johnny Lee Miller, a who's who of British acting talent. But despite his pedigree, connections, and undeniable talent, Pertwee never broke through to leading man status in major films. Instead, he became what the industry calls a that guy, a character actor whose face is familiar but whose name most audiences don't know. His career became defined by playing hard-nosed military types, grim-faced police officers, and gruff supporting characters who die violent deaths. In fact, Pertwee has been inducted into something called Cinemorgue's Performers with Over 20 Deaths, having met brutal on-screen ends so frequently that it became his unofficial specialty. The contrast between Pertwee's early promise and where his career ended up is stark. While his Natural Nylon co-founders McGregor, Law, and Miller went on to become international stars with Oscar nominations and blockbuster franchises, Pertwee remained stuck in the lower tiers of the industry. He worked constantly. His IMDb page shows over 90 credits, but in progressively smaller and less prestigious projects. His biggest role in recent years was playing Alfred Pennyworth in Fox's Gotham series, which ran from 2014 to 2019. It was steady work on a moderately successful show, but it wasn't the breakthrough that would elevate him to the A-list his talent deserved. What happened? Industry insiders suggest that Pertwee may have been too versatile for his own good, never developing a specific persona or type that audiences immediately recognized. His raspy voice and intense presence made him perfect for character roles, but perhaps not quite right for romantic leads or action heroes. The Natural Nylon production company dissolved, His famous co-founders moved on to bigger things, and Pertwee found himself increasingly relegated to supporting roles in genre films and television. He didn't vanish due to scandal or addiction. He simply never achieved the fame his background and talent suggested he would. Today, Sean Pertwee continues working steadily in British television and film, but he's a far cry from the stardom his father achieved or that his early career trajectory promised. He's living proof that talent, connections, and hard work don't always translate to lasting fame. Mark Lester, Oliver Twist, Twisted Fate. Mark Lester became one of the most famous child actors in the world when he played the title role in the 1968 musical film Oliver. His innocent face and pure singing voice, though his singing was later revealed to have been partially dubbed, made him the perfect embodiment of Charles Dickens's orphan protagonist. The film won 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, and Lester's performance made him an international sensation at just 10 years old. He appeared on magazine covers, did publicity tours, and seemed positioned for a long career as Britain's answer to child stars like Shirley Temple. But Lester's transition to adult roles proved nearly impossible. He continued acting as a teenager, appearing in films like Melody with Jack Wilde and Crossed Swords, where he played young Edward Tudor. But these projects never matched the success of Oliver. By his late teens and early 20s, the roles had essentially dried up completely. The cherubic features that made him perfect as Oliver became a liability as he aged. Casting directors saw him as forever locked into that innocent child persona and couldn't imagine him in mature, complex adult roles. By the mid-1980s, Lester had essentially abandoned acting altogether. He retrained as an osteopath, earning a medical degree and establishing a completely different career in alternative medicine. For decades, he practiced osteopathy and acupuncture, living a quiet life far removed from the Hollywood spotlight that had once illuminated him. Most people who visited his clinic had no idea they were being treated by the former star of an Oscar-winning film. Lester has occasionally re-emerged for Oliver's reunions and anniversary celebrations, but these appearances only highlight how completely he vanished from the entertainment world. Unlike some child stars who struggle with addiction or scandal, Lester simply couldn't find work as an adult actor and pragmatically moved on to another profession. In interviews, he's been candid about the difficulty of transitioning from child star to working adult actor, noting that the industry often has no place for former child actors once they age out of juvenile roles. He's also made headlines over the years by claiming to be the biological father of one of Michael Jackson's children, though these claims have been disputed. Today, Mark Lester represents the forgotten child stars, those who achieved massive fame incredibly young, then vanished into normal life when Hollywood no longer wanted them.